my cellar. We'll just jump right in. It surprises me at times how many players forget that a lot of modern concepts and standards did not reflect well in a fantasy middle-age setting. Oh, I know that is part of the social contract that we must be mindful. I know that as part of the social contract that we must be mindful of modern sensibilities, but we are talking about a fictional setting of our own creation. In some ways, it's like out-of-character knowledge. Most players of a given system will acquire the rule books as well, and rightly so. But does your character know what you know? There's another question, a comment later on that kind of touches back around this same area. If you're going to play a role-playing game in the Middle Ages, then if you catch typhus, you're dead, because there weren't any drugs that fought, typhus or cholera or any of these. Okay, so how real do you want to get? It's entirely up to you. How real do you want to get? And know that we didn't know these things. And there's a thing about bodybuilding and another comment later on that touches on this again. You sometimes you have to tell the player your character doesn't know that. He wasn't there or she wasn't there when such and such a fact was discovered, or whatever. Wasn't there when this treasure was found. And therefore, you don't know anything about it. I remember playing in a game one time, the DM described a golden statue in a dungeon, not expecting us to be able to leave with it. I confirmed that it was solid gold, not hollow or gold-plated. I think we managed to cut an arm off and leave with that. Spent weeks milling the gold into coins once we got back to civilization. It didn't break the campaign, though the DM definitely had to make adjustments and never made that mistake again. Well, I find it interesting that you spent time milling coins. You counterfeited coins, basically. Doesn't matter if they were the same weight and all those specs, that you weren't authorized to make them, so you were counterfeiting, making fake coins, whether or not their gold value was right. So I find that interesting, that the DM would let that go without the possibility of being, whether it's in coins, ingots, or nuggets, a sudden influx of cash is going to bring the attention of those who would like to have that cash for their own, whether they're crooks or tax collectors or corrupt government officials or dirty mayors or, whatever. But, okay, I'll give you props for getting an arm off. That must have been fun. And I'm sure, listen, I made the same mistake on my very first dungeon. I went through and I followed the 3 little brown books, and there was way too much treasure in that dungeon. Way too much. Way too many monsters for that matter. There were way too many monsters. But I didn't know any better. And DMs making this kind of mistake usually don't know any better, unless they have been lucky enough to see a podcast where someone tells them, don't do that. But I did it. There was way too much treasure down there. Luckily, I didn't go overboard on magic and magic items and weapons. But boy, there was treasure, jewelry, and gems. Wow. And I stopped that. No more of that. Building in breaks makes a lot of sense. It's not unlike working out. People who regularly lift weights learn that the muscles need a break. This is why routines are adjusted. And here we go back to that very first one about modern standards being applied. I'm sorry, if you're going to play in a medieval fantasy setting or most any of the fantasy settings, fantasy, swords and sorcery, I'm not talking about the sci-fi and the post-apocalyptic, doing, you're going to end up like the buffoons on Muscle Beach. Oh yes, it's that way because they're muscle bound. Your character might be smart enough to know what's going on, but if you've got some muscle head who's got high strength and low intelligence, if you keep trying to buff your strength up, I will start hitting your character with restrictions on mobility and flexibility. And no, you're taking modern knowledge. Kinesiology is a relatively new, couple of centuries old at best, study how the body fits together and works. Remember, 300 years ago, 200 years ago, they were persecuting people. In 400 years, they were killing people for cutting open bodies of dead people trying to understand how they worked. So no, that one doesn't wash. In gaming, we're using a lot of muscles as well, mental muscles, and it does improve the overall experience. Yeah, okay, you learn the game, you have more fun playing it. Duh. I would hope so. I hope you don't learn the game so now you can figure out how to get around and subvert. But hey, if that's your bag, fine. But players like that don't last long in my groups or even in my games. Breaks. No, breaks, as we'll go to another comment in a minute. The break thing is In gaming, we usually back in the day, I think this is why my tables usually had two different systems we play. AD&D and Star Wars were the most common. Okay. But you got to be a superior gamer to remember that, okay, I'm here playing this and this only, and I can't use any of the, my character cannot have any knowledge that I might have acquired doing that. Just my point of view, your mileage may vary. Can you name a few of your favorite house rules for board games? What made the change or changes good? Well, what made any change in a board game good was when all the players playing it agreed that it was logical or realistic or whatever, okay? That's the best one. Without a doubt. Now, we made my old group, a few decades ago, made our own house rules for the old Avalon Hill card game, Naval War. And Avalon Hill knew about them and asked me, and I said, sure. And so we took all our old house rules and put them into the advanced rules for the reprint that Avalon Hill did. And they were well received. Those are the best house rules, ones that work again and again and have a logic consistent with the logic of the game, the mechanics, the structure of the game. In outdoor or tabletop role-playing, how do you feel about allowing the presence of horses, dogs, pets, or familiar to increase the chance of detecting monsters, NPCs, and etc.? Okay. I'm fine with that. I'm not going to say your animals can't act like animals. Your bloodhounds don't have good noses anymore, or your horses are half-wits. No, I'm not. Animals can be animals, and certainly some animals can be more helpful to a group, whether it's just hauling out loot and with donkeys or burros. Don't ask anybody. Study your history. If you want a beast of burden to haul out your loot, you want a donkey or a mule. You don't want a horse. They can't haul as much for as long. In an ideal world, you'd have a couple of donkeys in a cart. But yeah, now we're going a little afield. Dogs, sure. I don't have any objection to any animal involved in the group having a natural, small n here, natural reaction. However, now you have something more to guard, to keep safe than just your person. I wouldn't advise taking a Pomeranian, something so excitable that it's going to yip, 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 and give you away, or just become a snack for something larger. I wouldn't necessarily recommend, a basset hound for their mobility issues, but certainly I don't have a problem with if it's part of the world, then we'll bring it in. If you want animals that aren't easily flustered, you want donkeys or burros that can be gentle to the point where they're pretty placid and they'll not freak out with loud stuff going on around them. You wouldn't want a prized Arabian stallion who'll dilate his nostrils twice, turn around, kick the shit out of you, and bust. You don't want animals that are going to be seen as prey by other predators out there. For instance, my favorite monster, the boulet, was designed to have a fondness for ponies on purpose. I've told the story before. There were too many ponies and dwarven ponies that could see in the dark in the mines in the world of the game, the milieu that was the game. So I designed a monster that would cut down on that. Let me see if this needs adjusting. No, it's good. Okay. So, no reason you can't take them. It's just something else you got to protect. I mean, even if you're carrying pigeons to send messages back, you got to allow for the fact that there's going to be bird-eating reptiles around, and bird-eating, whether they're lizards or snakes or, whatever. It's another aspect of the game. It's another color on the palette. Let's see. The best rules change. I'm still going back to that. I can't really say there was one. We used to, house rules for board games wasn't nearly as frequent as house ruling for miniatures. Because it was nearly impossible to write a set of miniatures rules that would allow for all the possible combinations. And so we would, okay, this obviously kind of goes clunk. What do we want to do with it? Or something got overlooked. Okay, everybody's happy with it. It's a good one. I mean, let's face it. Printed rules, in my opinion, in some games, have rules that I think are dumb. But I still play by them. In regards to using healing potions to manage how often players want to rest when playing 5th, it's my experience it's not hit points they are resting to regain. Usually it's special traits or abilities for each class that recharges after a short or long rest. Abilities like action surge, spell slots, or other special case abilities. So healing potions won't resolve that issue. Well, being just a little snarky here, that's one of the many reasons I don't care for the later editions. That's not what I play. It's just not what I play. Oh, I need to take a 20. You look up the sky, it's about 2 past the meridian. I need to take a break so that my ass will glow red again when I need it to light the way. That's my special ability. I don't like the special abilities that are rampant in the later editions. Those editions are just rife with somebody's little, I like this and I like that and I want to be able to do this and I want to shoot rainbows out my ass. Well, I want to be able to spit lightning bolts. No. And that's, in my opinion, that's what most of those special abilities are. Okay, rant over. Enormous treasure is Beckme or AD&D. That's the point. They then become the target of every other adventure, hiring guards and etc. Well, yeah, okay. First off, how are you starting your campaign? Are you starting it in a great city? Are you starting it in a small village in a shire where the group, however you want to machinate it, all meet up together and decide, hey, let's go do this together? That's old school first level. You have to decide how little are you going to start at. For instance, if you started in a campaign back in the mid to late 70s, especially a Lake Geneva style campaign, you started out at a small village in a troubled shire, well, you found a bunch of something or other. You ended up hauling it around with you because there was nobody to buy it from you. There was no way to convert it into ready cash or portable wealth like gems. So now you came back. God, what am I going to do with all this? Now you had to move somewhere else, probably a larger place, or the DM could say, oh, well, there's a well-known spot deep in the forest where all manner of merchandise is exchanged. You can set something up. Now, if you're going to start out in a great bustling metropolis, well, that's fine. That's a good place to start because if you come into a lot of wealth, and a little gets spread over here and a little gets spread over there, and some of these get spread over there, you can dispose of a lot of visible wealth, convert a lot of it into invisible wealth in a big city. But these are things you have to think about when you're setting up your economy. Are all your first levels starting out in a low-ranked economy that's mostly barter? Okay. Boy, are they going to be ripe for the plucking when they get to a bigger city because they don't know big city ways. All these things can play into it. These are all threads you can pull into your weave. And yeah, making them targets of others, sure. Sure. I have no problem with that. I wouldn't set two groups against each other. That wouldn't be fair to either group of players. I always give the players something to think about when they show up back in civilization with pockets bulging with treasure. Especially since I generally like to start players out as young people. Bunch of 16 to 20-year-olds going back in town suddenly with cash to throw around. People get curious. Local political leaders will want to cut in the form of an income tax of some sort. Criminals are going to try and rob them. Friends and relatives are going to be looking for loans or outright gifts. People are going to want to know where the money came from. Authorities might even suspect it was stolen. All very legitimate considerations, any or all of which can be woven into the tapestry of your story and your adventure. All of it. Now, if you've got all 16 to 20-year-olds, you don't have any high-level clerics, and you certainly don't have a magic user. Because it takes years of study to even become a low-level hedge-type wizard. And you probably are not going to have had it at 20. Unless you're going to concoct a backstory about how you were taken in as a starveling by a kindly old wizard. Oh, yeah, okay. But those are all good points to consider with dealing with sudden influxes of wealth, especially specie. When it's coins, it's real hard to disguise that sudden influx. What game included in Dragon was your favorite? Well, I got two for totally different reasons. Snit smashing, because Tom and I sat down sort of giggly, thinking about, well, let's show S&T that their shit ain't all that hot anyway. We'll put out a game in our magazine that'll be fun to play. And it's not such a big deal, so quit being so shitty and snotty about it, S&T. There's the old SPI people. And we did. And it was fun. And it was silly. And people loved it. And so we came out with Snit's Revenge. Which was just... We weren't even making anything on those when we put them in the magazine. They were just gifts we were giving to the readers. Now, the best game was certainly Awful Green Things. We gave them an absolutely, completely playable game with near infinite replayability because of all the randomness of the monsters, the weapons, etc. That one, I'm real proud to have published. We had so much fun playtesting that. It seemed like every time we play tested, the only thing that would kill the alien was a damn can of soup. You could never get the flamethrower to be the weapon or the fire extinguisher. Boy, when that was the weapon to be the alien killer, the green thing killer. Okay, wondering if you could shed some light on a topic. How old is speaking in character and putting on a voice? Was this something that emerged right at the beginnings, or did it take time to emerge? Did Gary and y'all ever do a silly voice for the tavern keeper and give players a quest in first person? Or was that never a habit in the original gang? Well, I can't speak to the Minnesota crowd. I got to know the Lake Geneva crowd. I had my own crowd in Carbondale in the early days. And, we weren't a bunch... Again, I'll rant here a little bit. I'm appalled and nauseated by the would-be actors who do role-playing game broadcast, podcasts, in voices and all that. If you want to write a play and go act it. Anyway, that's just me. Did we? No. Now, did we sometimes use different tones of voice? Certainly. If I'm just talking to you like this, a conversational voice describing what's going along, and then a big booming voice echoes out across the temple, I'm going to drop, and I'm not going to do it now because my wife's sleeping upstairs. I'm going to drop and boom out whatever the god or the statue or the curse or whatever is. Yeah, I do that. To my knowledge, it wasn't terribly popular right away. One time at an early Gary Con, I slipped into parcel tongue, sort of. I was probably buzzed, and we were dealing with a snake, and I started slurring the S's on the sides of my tongue, and I just fell into it. And the table just sat there and went, and it was, and that's the only time I've ever broken into a character by using a voice or anything like that. It's just not my bag. Did anybody in my group in Carbondale use voices? No. If they might have tried, I might have discouraged it. I don't remember, but I don't think so. I don't even think anybody tried. Did anybody from the Lake Geneva group that I got to know later use voices? Certainly not, particularly if it was any of those guys having to voice a female. With the exception of Gary, all the DMs up there were scared to death of having to do anything that would make them seem effeminate. But that was their personal hang-ups. I certainly don't think it was very popular at the beginning. There may have been groups that got into it, and it may be that there were groups at colleges or whatever, where a couple of them were in the drama department and they had fun with it. And if they did it and they had fun with it, who are we to say don't do it? Was it common? Not to my knowledge. Not to my knowledge. Certainly not in Lake Geneva. But again, I don't know. I can't speak to the Minneapolis Twin Cities group or Dave Arneson's group. I don't know. Okay. Last comment. Oh yeah, video games absolutely can thank D&D a ton. Stop and think of some of the earliest computer games and how a ton of them were doing their best to emulate a D&D game in some primitive, mind you, way, or at least be influenced by the ideas, mechanisms. Oh yeah, I mean, of D&D. It isn't overly shocking that a bunch of computer nerds in the 70s were also into games. Half of my current gaming group works in computers in some way. Well, yeah, and the late Janelle Jacques was a perfect example in the game business for several years, well respected artist and designer, then went over to the other side, the dark side, the computer side, and did great work over there. And of course, took stuff that worked from one to the other. That's what made them work. Yeah, it's not shocking at all. It's what video games owe to D&D, not the other way around. Okay, that's all the comments. A long time ago, somebody, it might have been Steve Jackson Games, put out a little small game, which is why I think it was them, called them The Monster That Ate Sheboygan. I believe that was it. And of course, there were ways to defeat it, and yay, Sheboygan was saved. Well, in a more modern tale, the monster that tried to devour Lake Geneva apparently has been defeated. The Dungeon Hobby Shop is on the mark. The museum is closed, shut down, absolutely. The property is on the market, when it sells, Wizards will get part of that. And the monster that tried to eat Lake Geneva is liable for lots of legal costs of his own. And his mate has apparently tossed him out of the cave. So it would seem that it has come to a very satisfactory conclusion. Hateful people were found out and squashed. Though I'm sure they're still watching this and itching to make comment, but there's really not a lot they can say. And then it's come to my attention that there's a person who's brooded about his props, his credibility, his cred, for an any that he won in 11 or 12. And it's come to my attention that the product that won it looks an awful lot like another product that preceded it. And that I've also heard that one of the creators was closed out of the original product. And when looking at the two products side by side, the similarity is astonishing. There'll be more on that in upcoming episodes. But two things I really, 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 really hate. One is stolen honor. When people, mostly men, make claims to have received medals or done things that they didn't. The other is plagiarism. As an editor, publisher, and writer myself, I despise it. And on that kind note, I hope you all had a great Halloween. Dodada Gobi. Hello, and welcome to my cellar.
The curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs. Still quite a feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar. Last man around when them rates went down. Calling Gary in that Lake Geneva town. Hey Gary, it's an awful mess. Let me edit, we'll have success. D&D and Dragon Magazine. He's the curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs, but he's still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar. Magic missile, it's a mortar shell. Make it hit in the first level spell. Brought psionics to the game to attack that wizard's brain. ESR and fantasy, collection of micro armory, Titan with tramp under a tree, high as could be. He's the curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs, but he's still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar. Still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar.